Coming up next on the Union Label is a conversation with Greg Hobgood, Business Manager of IBEW Local 816. Welcome back. I'm Barry Craig. Tell us what the union has meant to you personally.
Well, growing up, Barry, I'm a third-generation electrician. My grandfather, which is my dad's father, was part of the IBEW Local 816. Then my dad got into the 816, and one of his brothers got into 816, and I fell right into it. So it's really meant everything to me, from the ancestors to my dad to me, and now to my children. The 816 provided everything that we have.
Any of your kids going to become electricians?
I don't know. I have a 13-year-old son and an 11-year-old daughter. The 13-year-old son has mentioned that he would like to be an electrician, but we'll have to see.
Well, when you were growing up with your dad, did he show you things about being an electrician when you were a kid?
All the time. As you know, being an electrician, your neighbors, your churches, different people will call. They'll have a light that didn't work, maybe a switch that didn't work, and I would tail along with him, and he would show me different things. At a young age, I learned a lot about electricity.
So it was sort of in your blood to start with.
Yes.
Yes. Now, Local 816, you said, I believe, was chartered in the 1940s?
1947.
Of course, here in Paducah.
Yes.
And now, tell us about the apprenticeship program that you go through to be an electrician.
Okay. Local 816 has its own training facility now. Years ago, when I first started back in 1985, we were part of West Kentucky Tech. And now we have a training facility. It has 5 classrooms, a computer room.
Now, where is that?
It's out off of John Purrier Drive, off of Shade Tree Drive. And we're self-sufficient as far as training goes now. We have a lab, and it go back to the apprenticeship. It is a 5-year program. It entails on-the-job training and also a curriculum sent down by the national JATC that we have to go by.
Now, what does JATC stand for?
It's a Joint Apprenticeship Training Committee. We're affiliated with IBEW being part of it, and NECA, National Electrical Contractors Association, being the other part.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do is we advertise, we take applications for candidates, and they have to meet certain criteria. One of the main things is you have to have a successful passing algebra class, because math is a lot of electricity.
Is that right?
Yes.
Well, that would let me out right there.
And but we have a process where you come in and fill out an application. We have an entrance exam that you have to take and make a minimum score. And at that point, if you make the minimum score, you'll be put on a list for interview. And I think we interview 3 to 4 times a year, depending on the number of people that have applied. And at each year, around August, we take anywhere from as minimum as 10 and up to as many as 22 apprentices, depending on the job outlook. Mm-hmm. And at that time, they'll start the first year. The first year has its own curriculum. They go through it and on-the-job training, and they progress all through the 5 years. And at the end of the 5 years now, we have what we call a craft certification. It's a module set up, and whenever that person is successfully passed all the grades and has the number of hours, they go in and test, and it's actually like they have to hook the motors up, hook the switches up, run the conduit, pull the wire, and set everything up the way they should on the job to certify them as a craftsman.
Do they go, in the old days, I think you went through an apprentice, a journeyman, and a master. Do they still do that?
No, typically we just start out and you're classified as a first-year apprentice, second-year apprentice, third, fourth, and fifth. And at the last stage, if you do your craft certification, you become a journeyman wireman.
Now, what are the different types of electricians that IBEW represents?
Well,
Local 816.
We have an inside agreement with our NECA contractors and our local contractors, which what I would tell people is from the meter base in. The high voltage linemen take them from the transformer to the weatherhead to the meter base. And then from the meter base in, we take care of it, residentially, commercially, and
They would be like
industrially.
construction electricians,
Yes.
working on houses and
Yes.
buildings and things.
Yes. And then we have 816 also represents the utilities. We have the electrical lineman utility, and also we represent Mayfield rural electric, which they're voice and data and communication. But they're still listed under the utility.
Back during the ice storm, I saw quite a few of the Mayfield Electric and Water System guys in our street, as well as the West Kentucky RECC guys, and they were most welcome. People were bringing hot chocolate to them. We didn't have any gas heat to heat up the hot chocolate, but they were really welcome in that ice storm. Let's talk about this. That, of course, is said to have been the greatest disaster to befall our region probably since the '37 flood. I mean, working conditions were atrocious for this. Lines broken, poles broken. What are some of the things well, I'm sure to you that was the worst mess you'd ever seen?
Yes, it's the worst mess I've ever seen. I had a guy call me on Tuesday morning, or it may have been the Monday morning before the storm, and he was coming in from Knoxville, and they made mention on the Weather Channel in Knoxville that there would be a catastrophic and historical storm coming through the Kentucky region. And he asked me if I was ready.
Right.
He asked me if I was ready, and I said, sure, I'll go by and get a jug of milk and some eggs. I'll be ready. Little did I know what we were up against. You know, Tuesday it was raining, freezing, and then Tuesday night most people lost their power, and Wednesday it was just terrible. And then you talk about the linemen and utilities, they're expected to go out all the time. I talked to people that said that they had 1 day off in a 30-day span because of the power outages. And
I guess people don't realize how destructive ice is. And you're right, we lost our power at 6:30 in the morning on the Tuesday. And it continued on, and all day Wednesday, limbs kept breaking, even though the sun came out. And it was just awful. It looked like a battlefield.
yes, I spoke to some linemen, which utilities here in Western Kentucky mobilized all kinds of support from outside our area. And I think at one time I heard that there were 1,500 to 1,800 extra linemen brought into the area to fulfill the crews trying to get this back online. And one mentioned to me, he said, you know, he'd been to Saskatchewan, he'd been to Katrina, and he'd been to another disaster somewhere south. He said he'd never been to a place where one day it was freezing, the next night it was 9 degrees, and 2 days later it was 70 degrees.
Sure was.
Now, I don't have the exact numbers on all that, but he said it was really amazing the weather change that they had, but still the disaster was there. The
Sure
devastation was there.
You're
The
right.
weather was pretty,
Sure was.
and the devastation was here.
That Saturday, I remember we were out without power for 11 days, but that Saturday I was out cutting wood for our wood burning fireplace, our only heat source, in a t-shirt.
Yes.
And it was like it had been 9 degrees before that. How does the cold make it doubly difficult to work with electricity like that?
Well, the cold makes it where the body doesn't want to function well, the way I perceive it, because I don't like working in cold. And the demand, these linemen, they have it in their heart, which I don't discourage or discredit anyone that's a lineman. And it's just difficult because one guy said he was climbing a pole, and the pole, you know, had ice on it. You have to climb a little bit, break the ice, climb a little bit, break the ice, and when you get up there to work, everything you're working with is covered with ice. So the cold just makes everything more difficult to deal with.
I was watching these crews hook these lines back, and they were knocking the ice off of it. So the ice had to be removed before they could hook the lines up.
Yes. And the problem with the ice, I know there in Reedland where I was staying, there was a limb on a Tuesday morning that was hanging down over the garage eave. And I thought, this is odd, but it was about the size of my little finger, and it had maybe a ½ inch ice around it. Well, I came back by the next afternoon, I bumped my head on it. Next thing you know, there's 2 inches of ice around it. And I don't know the exact time frame, but you take these lines that the power is being transmitted on, and they build up, that water weighs somewhere around 8 pounds per gallon.
Right.
It doesn't take very much area to get a pound, and then you add up all the weight. And TVA sent me an email, and one of the 500,000 lines, I don't remember if it's between Cumberland, if it's in Draftonville or where, but one of the big arms had collapsed. I don't know if a tree was part, I wouldn't think a tree would have been part of it, but just the sheer weight had collapsed. They brought in a 100-foot boom crane, the helicopter crew. a dozer, and a big utility trailer to pull out there, and they just mobilized.
Tell us about that helicopter crew. That astonished me. How does that work?
Well, I went out there. They were working out near Draftonville one afternoon, and I pulled in there just to see who they were, and I give IBEW Local 816 stickers out. And I pulled in. These guys were out of Chattanooga. They were IBEW members. And they were taking lunch. The helicopter pilot was taking lunch. He'd been exhausted, they said, because they had several lines down. In this case, the lines were dead, and he was just, they have a platform sticking outside the helicopter structure, and they have a man that's willing to go out there and hang a roller. Whenever they bolt the arm up, the arm, the way I see it from the ground, which I've not been up there, but it has brackets and receivers for rollers. And the man out on the boom puts the roller up and feeds the cable through, and then they go down to the next one.
Sitting on a platform.
He sits out on the platform.
Well, you know, I heard about that, and I'm thinking, extremely cold temperature. You got the downdraft from that helicopter, and that'd be pretty tough to work, and that's like working in a 150 mile an hour wind. I mean, he's going to get downdraft from that. That must have been an unbelievable job.
The amazing part to me was it was sleeting while I was watching it. The time I was watching it, you had the helicopter pilot in the winds. I mean, it's just amazing to me that a man would sign up for that type of work. But we appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. I heard about that, and obviously he was strapped on that platform, but that had to be miserable. I mean, he had to be cold because that just blowing right through him.
It's unreal what they went through.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, the linemen on the second day into it, it was still sleeting, got down to 9 degrees. You know, they kept pushing through it, working on whatever they need to get the power back. And we go into this, I talked to a couple of them the other day. One of the big dangers of this is all the generators that were sold and hooked up. And there is a danger in that because the homeowner may not sufficiently disconnect the lines going back out on the line, the high line. And it can backfeed and it can light the high power back up inversely, just like through the transformer. Just like the transformer brings it from high voltage to low voltage, it can take the low voltage to high voltage. And I know of 2 incidents on Jackson Purchase where the line was down in the yard, but the homeowner had backfed the transformer, and they called because it was causing a fire in the yard, didn't know why. And of course, Jackson Purchase, you know, it's an emergency situation causing a fire. They go out there and they realize that it was backfeed, and they pulled the electric meter and it stopped. But that's how easy it could have been extremely dangerous for the linemen.
You know, and I wondered about that because I know there were 2 instances at least. A man in Graves County had the generator in his basement, and a fellow up in Owen County did the same thing, and they were killed by carbon monoxide. I know enough about electricity to leave it alone. And I know people were talking about hooking these generators into their lines. I said, man, I wouldn't have a clue how to do that. And so we just dealt with it with a wood-burning fireplace and a kerosene heater. But I mean, everybody all of a sudden became amateur electricians, and that's a recipe for serious, serious trouble.
Yes, it's a recipe for destruction. But I personally would like to know how many generators were sold in this area.
Oh, it had to be in the hundreds.
There's no telling.
Because I know we were out driving around. I was taking pictures of things, and they were lining up for generators at various electrical places, and they would, on television they'd advertise, you know, Home Depot's getting in so many, or whoever. And it was interesting to me though, as this thing began to peter out and power began to come back on, I wonder how many of those generators were unsold at that point, but I mean, who knew how long it was going to last? And I think that was the difficulty. Well, when this thing hit, I mean, and you guys got the call, I mean, you must have felt overwhelmed. Where do we start?
Yes. Where do you start? I mean, we had our inside wiremen. I got a few phone calls of our just general electricians I call. You know, they work for contractors, they're not contractors. And I told them, I said, you know, this is a national disaster. The IBEW and Local 816 is not going to ridicule you for going out and helping a neighbor. Well, under these circumstances, you should help anybody you can. Be safe, do a good job, but help anybody that needs help. And as far as I know, there's no telling how many IBEW Local 816 members actually went out and did the neighborly thing and helped people, worked on their services, because we had conduits ripped off houses. We had lines in the yard. We had parts of houses destroyed. And I think that I can say honestly that I'm proud of the 816 members to go out and do what they needed to do to help the community and the whole area to get things back. We're a long way from normal. It's going to take years to get back to normal, but we are working together to make that happen.
One of the things I was talking to one of the workers in Mayfield, and he said, he said Mayfield is going to have to reconsider their policy of trees and power lines. And I suspect that's true, because the worst destruction was in areas with these big, beautiful trees. And that's so sad to drive around the area and see these trees just torn to shreds. But as we speak now, is power been restored pretty much everywhere as far as you know?
What I heard yesterday from a lineman steward of mine at JP, that they have the residents, they've hooked up most wells. Some farmers, I didn't even realize this, but some farmers had power going out to wells that pumped water for livestock. It hadn't been on for 4 or 5 weeks. But that was the latter part of the priority. Priority number one was emergency, then regular houses and things like that.
Yeah.
But they're going back, and Joe Reeves said that from Jackson Purchase standpoint, that it'd probably be 2 or 3 more weeks before they get power back to all the meters that really need them. So we've got a long ways to go.
Yeah, yeah. And then of course the cleanup too.
Yes.
Is just.
I mean, whenever the line crew got there, their main objective was to set a pole, get the power back on, and just leave whatever, make a nice lay down yard somewhere where that they could come back later and pick it all up. But you have one of my eyewitness accounts was over in Marshall County. There were 12 poles down in a row. How do you expect a line crew to come in and just have power back on?
You're right. We were, as I said, we lost power at 6:30 Tuesday, and so my in-laws down in Arlington in Carlisle County, they had gas heat but no electricity, and so they said, why don't you come down and take a hot bath? And we said, oh, that'd be great. So between Mayfield going through Fancy Farm and Milburn to Arlington, our son counted 52 down poles. There was one particular area between Milburn and Arlington where there were 2 huge transformers on a platform. They were in a ditch. And I thought, how long will it take to get power back here? But I was amazed how quickly power was restored, because we were getting, when we got down to Arlington that day, I talked to one of my wife's cousins, and he said, they're telling us 30 to 45 days. But they got power back quicker than that.
Well, it's hard to tell someone 2 weeks and it not happen.
Right. Oh, I'd rather err on the other side
Yes.
than the other.
But I think overall, from the devastation we actually had, I'm amazed that it worked out as well as it did. It took a lot of coordination, a lot of hard work, and a lot of dedication for it to work out the way it did. Because Western Kentucky is a huge area. Yeah. A lot of rural area.
It is.
And I think the power companies did a great job.
And this devastation, we went up to Frankfort on the 11th of February, and it was from here to Muhlenberg County at least, and it was devastating. And it kind of petered out as it went up that way. But I mean, that's a many counties, and as you said, these rural areas, it was just, it's phenomenal. Somebody told me, and I don't know if I read this or somebody read this, that to put electric lines underground cost $1 million a mile.
I'm not sure on the exact cost, but to have a high voltage cable with the proper, the insulation it would require would cost probably 4 or 5 times more. This is just my estimate of hearing people talk. I haven't got an actual cost. It costs 4 to 5 times more than the single, all 3 lines above ground. Because of, you got to have the copper. Because outside it doesn't have to be insulated, and aluminum can work good. It can carry the capacity. But you'd have to put copper underground to get it, I believe, to get it insulated properly. And there are a few subdivisions that do the underground.
There's one near us in Mayfield, and of course, as soon as the juice went on in Mayfield, they had it.
Yeah.
And the rest of us didn't, who had the lines.
But I don't know the exact cost, but I just know that it's simpler to repair. If you were to have to repair something underground, it would be more difficult.
Right.
And I don't know the frequency of repair.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we don't have it around here.
Right. Right.
There's a lot of people wished we had.
Right. At this point, for
Yes.
sure. So, well, one of the things when the storm hit, we didn't have a lot of was actually utility poles. How did they get so many in here so fast?
They expedited transformers. Different municipalities and different RECCs across the country, they keep in contact, and they just use their systems to call things in.
Mm-hmm. Well, in a disaster, of course, and I talk to crews from all over the place. Do your guys go just all over the place for these emergency things, like Jackson Purchase crews and West Kentucky RECC?
Yes.
Do they go everywhere?
Yes, they do. Like if there's a disaster down south with the Katrina or the hurricanes, I think JP sent 2 crews. I mean, they can't send everybody naturally, but they do pitch in and send a couple of crews. I think that West Kentucky Rural Electric has sent crews. And typically they send them out on a rotating basis. Like you sign up and you go for 2 to 3 weeks, and then you come back and another group will go. Mm-hmm. That way you don't get exhausted. Mm-hmm. And
that was tough on these guys. I mean, I like to travel too in motels up to a point, but man, you drove around this area. I mean, there were these trucks all over the place, and they were living out of motels, and it was really tough on these guys.
Yes, well, I think we had crews from Maryland, as far as Minnesota, and Florida and Alabama. I'm not sure how many exactly. I didn't keep up with the count. And they work for different utilities. But how do you volunteer to sign up, go somewhere on a 2-week basis and work 60 hours, 80 hours a week or 90 hours a week, and still function, and then have to come back to your regular job? So I praise those guys that actually take care of it.
Oh yeah. And sad to say, one man was killed in this, a guy from Minnesota.
Yes, Andy Rockwan, I believe is his name. I'm not sure about how his pronunciation is, but yes, he come in from Minnesota. He was an IBEW member from Local 160 in Minnesota, and he was injured in an accident working for Jackson Purchase, and he did lose his life, yes. And that was a kind of a setback, really a setback, I know, but the men really rallied around his crew, and they came together, and they kept progressing, and everything's worked out. I know it was a tragedy for his family.
Yeah, yeah. And was anybody else injured?
The Jackson Purchase had a lineman on that same pole when it broke, and he what we call in the trade, burnt the pole. He did have bruises on.
What does that mean, burnt the pole?
He slid down the pole, it was still standing. It tore his sleeves off of him. It splintered his right hand, I believe, bruised his right hand, hurt his left leg, maybe his right hip. He had some minor injuries, we call them. He was back to work in 2 or 3 days.
One thing when we were kids used to always impress us were these guys would climb poles with the spikes on their shoes. They don't do that too much anymore, do they?
They do. In their training, they have to learn it. And I saw several crews while I was out looking around, trying to evaluate what all did happen in the area I grew up in. There was a line going across the field, 7 or 8 poles. That one that I was telling you about had 15 or 16. They had to climb all but 2 or 3 of those poles because they're out in the field. It was too muddy, the mud and the water and everything underground. Yeah,
I guess what I was getting at, of course, we live in the city, and they come out with bucket trucks on asphalt.
Sure.
But in fields, and that's another thing. When we were going down to Arlington, I saw a truck with a tracked vehicle. They're like tank tracks to get into these horribly muddy fields, which made it even more difficult. How do you set a pole in muck like that?
It's talent, I guess. I've seen them do it. They go out there and just set them and keep on going. It's amazing what the line crew can do. I had a person ask me, I don't remember who it was, said, I can't believe these linemen just sitting around here, drinking coffee and taking breaks and all this. And I said, man, you sit here for about another 10 minutes and watch them work, you'll understand why they take a break when they can. Because they're working hard for you. I've never seen a line crew that would not work. Now, I've seen them take breaks because they need them. But they are working and have the best interest of that line when they're working.
Well, and it's also the stress to me. I mean, it's not natural for a human being to be hung on a pole 30 feet above the ground, playing around with this stuff that is, well, you get one mistake, I guess, and that, well, you don't even get that.
Yeah.
I mean, you get
Yeah.
the voltage
There's
that goes
no-
through that.
You don't get mistakes.
You don't get
mistakes.
you don't get a do-over on that. And to me, the stress of that. And I watched these guys on our street. This pole was 40 feet tall, I guess, and they actually built the cross arms, put all the insulators on, and then had this machine that stood this pole up, and then they had to get up in the buckets, which I'm not all that fond of heights, you know, and you get up in these buckets. This bucket's 40 feet above the street, and they were up there knocking that ice off that stuff and trying to hook these lines up. It's a lot of people are scared of electricity. How do you get over your fear of it, or can you?
I say I really don't. I'm not afraid of it. I really respect it. See, as an inside wireman, typically 480 volts, some 600 volts is basically all we deal with. With these line crews, it's 13.8, 7.2. That's 7,200 volts, 13,800 volts. And the big high line towers for TVA are 500,000 volts. And you just train well and pay attention to what you're doing on the line, and watch your buddy. Have the buddy system. Make sure your buddy knows when it's off or when it's hot, and prepare if it is hot.
Mm-hmm. Of course, voltage going into a house is quite enough to do you in too if you're not awfully careful. That's enough to.
Yes. The statistics show that more people get killed with 110 volts than any other voltage, but that's because of the popularity of it. You know, in the house, you have children, they have different safety devices for plugs, and appliances have come a long ways in the years because of the electrical factor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
that's why training is so important.
Yes, safety.
Well, getting back to your apprenticeship program, even if you knew nothing about electricity, you could still enroll and learn?
Yes. You don't have to have a history of electricity. You don't have to have a degree in electricity or anything else. We'll start you off from scratch, teach you what you need to know.
Mm-hmm. The algebra part, that astonishes me. And
that's one of the requirements nationally, to have algebra.
Because math and electricity, I can see that. But wow, that would have certainly kept me from that career.
But we have a great apprenticeship program. You know, we can provide skilled craftsmen for this area.
Oh yeah. You
know.
And so once again, Mayfield Electric and Water. Who are some of the?
Jackson Purchase, Mayfield Rural Electric, Mayfield Rural Telephone. You have Hickman Fulton, Penny Ryle, and Mayfield Electric and Water are our utilities.
And then, of course, several private contractors.
Yes, we have about 15 private contractors, but we also provide TVA, Shawnee, Paradise, Kentucky Dam Hydro, and the combustion turbine plant at Calvert City, the operations part.
We're out of time.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us. My guest today was Gary Hobgood. I'm Barry Craig. Please join us next time.